Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are going to discuss a topic that is India heading towards stagflation? So in order to understand this question, we first must understand what is stagflation. What is stagflation? So stagflation is a situation in the economy when economy is having high inflation plus low economic growth. Fine. High inflation plus low economic growth. So if you will see past 6-month data, inflation in India, inflation is remain high. Fine. If we will discuss for past 6 months, inflation is about 6%. Fine. Inflation is about 6%. Whereas GDP growth rate is on decline. So what we define stagflation, that is high inflation plus low economic growth. And we can see that right now in India, inflation which is about 6%, 5 to 6%, inflation is remain high, and at the same time growth rate is also decreasing. So is it right to say that India is heading towards stagflation? So in order to understand and in order to find the answer, first we have to go and understand how this concept of stagflation came into the picture. Fine. So let's deep dive and understand how this concept of stagflation came, and is it right to say India is heading towards stagflation? Because this question was also raised in past. Even RBI officials have clarified in year 2023 that India is not heading towards stagflation. In 2024, Sanjeev Sanyal, who is a member of Economic Advisory Council, he also said that India should prepare for any kind of stagflation. If US is going to face the stagflation, India also have to ready. So whenever economy is going to face such kind of situation, economists start discussing whether there is a symbol or sign of stagflation or not. Fine. So in order to understand whether we are heading towards the stagflation or not, if we want to understand, what we have to do is we have to understand the concept, how it came into the picture. Okay. So actually, this concept of stagflation is a phenomena of 1970s. So first time this stagflation was identified in 1970, and the economist who contributed and who have explained this phenomena was Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was an economist who have given this concept of stagflation in 1970s. Fine. So what was that and how it happens? Let's understand. So I hope every one of you know that there is one incident in the economy. Fine. If you see the economic history, so it was the Great Depression. The Great Depression of 1929. So it was an event in the history of United States of America when depression went for longer duration. That economic depression which was started in year 1922, 1923, that went for a longer duration, and that is why they called what? Great Depression. Americans use the word great for the length. Fine. Do not confuse great was something like was very good one. No, great means for them, great means what? For long. For example, if any enthusiast of WWE, they may know that the name the Great Khali. So they call him the Great Khali. The great means what? The great means he was very tall, somewhere around 7.6 feet tall. Fine. So that was they are calling great. So here the great means what? The longer depression, what they have seen in 1929. So when the economy was having a depression, J.M. Keynes, who is considered as the most influential economist of 20th century, and he wrote a book, A General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. And that book is called as Magnus Opus, one of the finest one, Magnus Opus in the economics. And he was considered as the most influential economist of the 20th century. So John Maynard Keynes have suggested one solution. And according to his solution, he said that this depression-like situation in the economy is because of decreased demand in the economy. So public is not able to spend because of the economic situation. But in such situation, government have to increase its expenditure by increasing the borrowing. So government have to borrow, and with that borrowings, government have to spend more money on capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. So government have to increase its expenditure. So when government will borrow the money and spend the money, definitely demand will be triggered. And in that way, what will happen? Economy will able to revive the demand and economy will come on the track. So that was his suggestion in brief. Okay. So he want to trigger the demand because in the recessionary phase, demand is decreased. So he want to trigger the demand, and to trigger the demand, he suggested government's intervention. Through fiscal policy measures, government should intervene in the economy by increasing their spending. And how to increase the spending? By going for borrowings. Fine. So he suggested government should increase the expenditure. So when he suggested that government will increase the expenditure, fine, and government have to spend more and more, then economy is able to revive. Fine. And his solution was adopted by the US government and economy revived. From 1930s onwards, economy was not able to just revive. Economy start accelerating. And because economy got accelerating, government also increased its spending. Why? Because your economy was in depression. Demand was low. Government started spending more and demand was what? Accelerated. And because demand is accelerated, that is why economy starts growing, and government thought that if we will spend more, economy will grow more. So that is why from late 1930s onwards, US and other European economies, especially aftermath of Second World War. After Second World War, governments in Europe, government in US, they started spending a lot. And that spending is increasing what? Increasing the economic growth rate. Here, certain economists suggested that because government is spending more, fine, government is spending more, means increased government spending will leads to rise in demand, production, employment, and income. This was said. Fine. But certain economists have their reservation. They said that when government will increase its spending, means more money in the economy. And this more money in the economy will leads to what? Higher inflation. And higher inflation is not good for the economy. So people have questioned Keynesian approach. Keynesian approach is what? Increase the government spending. Increase government spending will trigger the demand, and that trigger demand will increase what? Production, and production will lead to what? Generation of more employment and income. But certain economists, they have shown their reservation that increased government spending also create what? High inflation. So those who are having a view like Keynes. In fact, Keynes was a British economist and he was basically from Cambridge University, and that is why there are certain economists who are having a way ki, okay, yes, what Keynes is saying that right, and they follow the Keynes. And these group of economists are known as scholars of Cambridge School. So what is Cambridge School? Those economists who are having a aligned view with whom? John Maynard Keynes. They are called as what? Cambridge School of Economists. So Cambridge economists, they've found that Keynesian theory is questioned. Why Keynesian theory is questioned? Keynesian theory is under question because certain economists are suggesting that Keynesian approach may lead to what? Keynesian approach may lead to higher inflation in the economy. So this is why what we have to do, we should not go for this. So to counter this view, one economist who is basically from Cambridge School, and he has given his theory. And that theory is known as Philip curve. So Philip was an economist and he admires John Maynard Keynes' theory, and he believed that Keynes was right. So in order to counter those views which are suggesting higher inflation, what he said that, okay, in order to clarify your doubts, I am going to use 50 years data of US and UK economy. And at that point of time, US and UK economy in 1950s, US and UK economy was one of the most prominent and fastest growing economy. Fine. So he took the 50 years data of US and UK, and what data? He took the data of unemployment and inflation. So he took the data of unemployment and inflation and he put this data on the curve. He put inflation here on y-axis and he put unemployment here on x-axis. And when he put the data of unemployment and inflation, he got this curve. He got this curve. So this curve shows that take 2 points on the curve, point A and point B. So point A, if you will see here, and point B. Fine. So if we'll see on point A, inflation is higher than point B, but unemployment is lower than point B. So on point A, what we can see that? We can see that higher inflation in comparison to point B. But at the same time, we have what? Low unemployment. Whereas on point B, inflation is low, but unemployment is high. So with this curve, which is known as a Philip curve, this curve is known as what? This curve is known as Philip curve. So Philip curve have explained inflation and unemployment are in inverse proportion. So you should not worry about the higher inflation. So if inflation is rising, no need to worry because higher inflation also leads to what? Decrease in unemployment. So this question which was raised on Keynesian theory, increased government spending will increase the money supply and higher inflation will be there. But Philip said that this higher inflation is actually inversely proportional to what? Unemployment. So you need not to worry about this. You should not worry about this, and government should keep spending more and more. So this is why this question was countered and government have further increased its spending. Fine, increases spending, and government have went for more and more welfare policies. Capital expenditure and revenue expenditure was continued. Government have announced many of the schemes, pension funds, lot of things they have started. Fine, but when Western economies was heading towards 1960s, means late 1960s, somewhere around 1968. Fine. So from 1968 onwards, US and UK economy, they started seeing a strange phenomena in their economy. Why it is strange? Because that was never happened before, and that is why a strange phenomena I'm using the word. So in this time, in 1968, around 1968, when data was published, fine, when data was published, it shows that they are having what? High inflation. So inflation is what? Inflation is keep high in the economy. But high inflation, that means what? According to whom? According to Keynes and according to Philip. If high inflation is there, then unemployment must be what? Low. But this time when data was released, inflation was high, plus GDP growth rate starts decreasing and unemployment starts increasing. Fine. And from 1968, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74. So for next 4 or 5 years, this strange phenomena was persistent in the economy. And here, neither Philip nor Keynes was able to answer. Fine. Especially Philip, who have given this curve, he was unable to answer. He was unable to answer. And then certain people, certain economists, they started questioning entire Keynesian idea. Entire Keynesian idea was questioned. And people started questioning Keynes' approach. And then they asked him, John Maynard Keynes, they have asked him, sir, whatever you have explained, that is not working right now. And do you know that what he said? When he was questioned in this era, he said that everybody have to die in the future. So people said that, what do you mean by this? He said that everybody have to die in the future means you ask me, provide the solution for one problem. You came to me as a patient, consider me as a doctor, and you came to me and you said that I am suffering for this disease. And I have given you the pills, I have given you the treatment to cure that disease. But I am not a doctor who can make you immortal. So I have given a solution of the problem of Great Depression. I have not given something which can be foolproof. I have provided one solution, and that solution was for that problem which you have faced in 1930s, that is the Great Depression. But you are using that solution in general. So I cannot have any answer for that, because I have suggested you increase government spending for come out of the depression. But you have started using that approach in general also. This lead to this problem. I do not have any solution for this. That was Keynes' way saying everybody have to die in the future. Whatever the solution you have, the single solution is not going to work everywhere. Everybody have to die. Fine. But the question remains same. What is this? What is this? Keynes have given up his hand. Philip was not able to explain. Fine. High inflation, and why this GDP growth rate is what? Why GDP growth rate is declining? Both of them, they are not able to answer. Here, one professor of the economics, he was from Chicago University, and his name was Milton Friedman. Fine, Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman came into the picture and he assessed the Philip curve again. And he said that what? When government increase its spending, he went to what? He went to the Philip curve and he provided an alternative explanation for that. He said that, see, what is happening? Government is increasing its spending. Fine. Government is increasing its spending. And because increased government spending, more and more money in the economy. And that more money in the economy is allowing people to increase their demand. So what is happening? The inflation and GDP growth rate. So basically GDP is what? Value of production, what we produce. So he said that what is happening is when government is adding more money in the economy, the rate of inflation is increasing with higher rate than the rate of what? Production. Fine. Means what? Inflation and GDP growth rate. Fine. So he said that what happens when government add more money in the economy? Demand increases, and that increase in the demand causes what? Rise in the inflation. But production also increases. So the rate of production is suppose that 6%, whereas rate of the inflation is what? Rate of the inflation is 3%. But if you will add more and more money in the economy at very short interval, then the demand is going to increase with higher rate in comparison to increase in the production. What he said that? Listen again. He said that when you will add more and more money in the economy without checking it, then what will happen? The rate of increase of the demand is going to be higher than the rate of increase of what? Production. Example. Here inflation is 3% and GDP growth rate is what? 6%. And you started fueling more and more money in the economy. So inflation reached to 4%. GDP growth rate reached to 7%. Fine. But you have added more economy. Inflation reached to 6%. GDP growth rate reached to 8.5%. Because production facility, increase in the production capacity takes some time. So gradually what will happen? Inflation is going to reach 8%, and here GDP growth rate is what? 9%. Fine. So if you'll see the difference, you see the difference. So price is increasing with what rate? 3% rate. And your income is increasing what? Your income, I am considering GDP, production generated income. So income is increasing by what? 6%. Fine. So suppose that there is a good having the price of what? 100 rupees. So the price increased to what? 103. Your income is increased from 100 to 106. So still there is a substantive difference in that. But here what is happening? Inflation rate is how much? 8%. And GDP growth rate is what? 9%. So price reached to 108 and your income reached to what? 109. And if still you are going to add more money in the economy, then at what time what happen? Inflation may reach to what? 10% and your income will be remain here only, or it may be 10%. Or it will reach to 12%, it will remain at what? 10 to 11%. Means if you are adding money in the economy again and again without checking the inflation, then at a point of time, the rate of inflation will be higher than what? Rate of growth. Fine. And when the rate of inflation will be higher than rate of growth, people's ability to purchase is not going to increase, but it is going to what? Decrease. And that is the situation where high inflation and GDP growth rate is what? Low. And he called this thing as what? Stagflation. He called this situation as a what? Stagflation. So when government is adding more and more money through the central bank, means RBI and government is increasing what? Money supply in the economy. How government is increasing the money supply? By spending more money. How RBI is increasing the money supply? By lowering down the interest rates. So decrease in the interest rates and governments increase spending. That may be lead to what? Higher inflation. And if the rate of inflation is going to be higher or near to what? GDP growth rate, then people's ability to purchase is going to what? Decrease, and low growth rate will be there. And that situation is called as what? Stagflation. Fine. So just for your better understanding, what he did here, here in this curve, as Milton Friedman studied this curve of Philip, and he said that after a certain point of time, this curve is going to be what? Straight. What he explained, he put in the curve also, and which curve? Philip curve itself. And he said that what will happen? After a certain point of time, if you will keep putting money in the economy, then this curve is going to be what? Straight. And this is a straight curve showing what? Inflation on y-axis, inflation is on keep rising, but unemployment is what? Not decreasing. And he used one term for this, that is NAIRU, non-accelerated inflationary rate of unemployment. Again, non-accelerated inflationary rate of unemployment. What he's explaining, he's saying that if you are going to keep adding money in the economy again and again without checking it, so what will happen? After a certain point of time, see, initially what will happen? Initially, when you will add money in the economy, your growth rate will increase. Inflation will also increase. But at a certain point of time, if you keep adding money in the economy, then what will happen? Then the rate of inflation is also going to near to what? Inflation and growth rate, this difference. But gradually will what happen? Both inflation and GDP growth rate is going to be at same kind of the pace, or the rate of growth rate and the rate of inflation is going to be almost there. In such situation, overall ability of the people is not going to increase but going to decrease. Imagine a situation. Your income is rising with what? Your income is rising with 10% rate, but the price is rising in the market 12% rate. So you got the hike of 10%, but the prices in the market is increasing with what? 12%. Then your effective ability to purchase is not going to increase despite 10% rise. Despite 10% rise, it is actually going to what? Decrease. Okay, now tell me, Indian economy, if Indian economy is able to achieve GDP growth rate of 9%, but inflation is also what? 8%. Whereas here GDP growth rate is somewhere around 7.5% and inflation is somewhere around 5 to 5.5%. So which one is considered as a good? Obviously this one. Here the difference between growth rate and inflation is 1%, whereas here you can see that the difference is what? 2 to 2.5%, which is very substantive. So this is why, despite able to achieve higher growth rate in the last few years of first decade of 21st century, means from 2005 to 2010 onwards, if you'll see that phase, 2005 to 2010, India was clocking with what? India was clocking with growth rate of 8%, 9%, 8%, 9%. Even till then, 2012-13, India was clocking with what? India was clocking 8%, 9% GDP growth rate. But inflation was also very high in the Indian economy. And that is why in 2016, Monetary Policy Framework Agreement was signed between Government of India and RBI to cut down the inflation and make sure inflation should be remain in the bracket of what? 4% plus minus 2%. Fine. Why? Because adding too much money in the economy will also trigger what? Higher inflation, and higher inflation will trigger what? Higher inflation triggers stagflation like situation. Fine. So this is the conceptual framework about stagflation. Fine. Now let's come to our main discussion point. Is India heading towards stagflation? If I'll ask you after this understanding, what you will say? Is India is heading towards stagflation? Yes or no? Answer is no. India is not heading towards the stagflation, because stagflation is a situation when economy is having higher inflation, and higher inflation leading to what? Higher inflation leading to low economic growth rate. You can say that, sir, this is what happening in Indian economy right now. We are having high inflation and our GDP growth rate is also slowing down. But inflation can be from different factors. For example, inflation may be because of what? Increased demand in the economy. Inflation may be of what? Inflation may be of supply side bottleneckness. Inflation may be because of what? Increase the cost of the production. For example, people have more money in their hand. Fine. So they will trigger the demand and price will increase. Fine. For example, during the festive time, especially that Navratris are there, North Indian people celebrate that, and not only North Indian, many people celebrate the Navratris festival and they go for the fasting. And in that fasting period, what happens? The price of fruits, especially fruits, is going to trigger very high because more demand. And whereas the non-vegetarian food demand is going to what? Decrease at that point of time, because people will go for the fasting and definitely they do not consume non-vegetarian food. So the price of those goods is going to decrease because less demand. Whereas the price of fruits is going to substantially increase. So that is demand generated inflation. Whereas when the supply got stuck during COVID time, entire world have faced the problem. Why? Even that today that problem is not completely resolved. Because of the lockdown, supply side bottleneckness was there. So supply side creates inflation, demand creates inflation, and sometimes cost factor also. For example, if the price of crude oil is going to increase, so rise in the price of the crude oil will lead to rise in the price of every good. Why? Because crude oil is an energy source which is used for production of most of the things. So if the price of crude oil is going to increase, then automatically inflation is going to increase. Fine. So inflation can be increased because of demand factor, supply factor, as well as what? Cost factor. But stagflation, which was explained by Milton Friedman and other economists, they are having one idea in their mind. Increased money supply, lowering the interest rates will lead to what? Higher inflation, that is demand generated inflation. So when the demand generated inflation is there, because of what? Demand generated inflation because of increased money supply. Increased money supply, then it will lead to higher inflation, and that higher inflation leads to what? Leads to stagflation. But if you will see the case of India, so in the case of India, if you will see the present situation of India, in the present situation of India, higher liquidity is not an issue. Higher liquidity is not an issue. In fact, system have low liquidity. Indian economy presently right now facing what? Low liquidity, and that is why RBI have decreased the CRR recently in order to infuse more liquidity in the economy. Fine. So higher liquidity is not a causing problem of inflation. The problem of the inflation, what we are seeing as food inflation, fine, lack of supply, proper production, plus higher price of crude oil in the international market. Fine. So we are facing the inflation not because of the demand side, but because of the supply and cost factors. And this is why it is not right to say that India is heading towards stagflation. Though conditions look like yes, conditions are satisfied, but circumstances are not right to say this. Okay, so this is why we cannot say that India is heading towards stagflation. But yes, India is heading towards a situation where inflation is remain high and production is what? Decreasing. However, government and RBI, both in their recent analysis, they have said that the demand is going to pick in the fourth quarter of the economy, and the first quarter of the financial year 2025-26, economy is going to what? Economy is going to pick up the demand. Like 2025-26 financial year going to start from which date? April 1st. So what they are assuming that this one is going to what? This one in the financial year of 24-25, it is going to what? The fourth quarter, the demand is going to pick up, and from this quarter, demand is also going to pick up. So in that way, demand is going to pick up and supply side is also going to work properly, and economy will again come on the track. So you should not worry. And same time, inflation have also seen the declining trend. In the third quarter of the economy, the latest data said that inflation, which was heading towards 6, now it is heading towards what? Decreasing. So by using all these data, we can say that inflation is on the declining trend, and definitely the measures taken by the government of India is going to help the economy to grow. So in nutshell, we cannot say that the economy is heading towards where? Stagflation. Okay. So I hope that you have understood all these concepts. If you have any specific query, you can put in the comment section. In the comment section, you can mention there. And if something which is you want to understand, and I'll see that and I'll make more videos on your queries, whatever you want to understand from us. Okay. So thank you for joining this session.